We'll start over.
I already used my best stuff.
It's all downhill from here.
Live on Facebook.
It's never as good the second time, you know?
That's debatable.
There's a joke to be made there, but I'm not.
Today, I'm here to give you the assurance that I have not forgotten you.
If we want to see the new evangelization become more than just jargon, if we want to see it grow legs and gain traction and change the world, we have got to take seriously our responsibilities as husbands and fathers, and especially as sons of God.
I want to propose to you then that something that our world is desperately in need of in the midst of this crisis is Catholic Christian masculinity.
If you want to be a good father, then bring your children to confession with you.
I can't get there unless I become a man of ascesis, a man of asceticism, a man of training.
A man not doing penance, a man not disciplined, is not a man.
You guys have upped your game.
You know what, guys? I gotta say, I love the concept of Man Show.
Warning: the Catholic Man Show is about to begin.
Welcome to the Catholic Man Show. We're on the Lord's team, the winning side, so raise your glass. Adam in hand here, sitting in studio. We have a full house tonight. Dave's right next to me. We got Juan on the buttons. We have Jim guarding the door, making sure that no one is going to barge in. And we have a good friend. I can't remember. Maybe this is the fourth, maybe fifth time on the Catholic Man Show.
Something like that.
Mr. Karlo Broussard.
Of all the people that we've ever had on our show, of all of our guests, Karlo, we have recorded with none of them as much as we have recorded with you.
Wow. I am deeply, deeply honored.
But yes, because that's true, because we did a whole
17-hour
series.
I didn't think about that. I forgot about it.
So for those who do not know,
you're just crushing second place as far as like hours recorded on the Catholic Man Show. So congratulations.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
For those who do not know, if you go to patreon.com/The Catholic Man Show, support us on any level, you have access to it's a 9-part series on St. Thomas's 5 ways over 17 hours that Karlo and Dave and I did together. Karlo, you wrote notes specifically for us on those 5 ways.
It was 17 hours?
It was 17 and a half hours.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know I could teach 17
We got our money's worth out of you. We got
our
money's worth out of you, Karlo.
It was a lot, but it was awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It helped me a lot.
I'm going to have to go back and watch it because I didn't know I could teach that much on that.
Yeah. No, really, I still think about that sometimes and how helpful that was for me because before we did that, I really didn't know. I knew, okay, the 5 ways. Thomas talks about 5 different ways, but I didn't know what they were or I didn't know what the arguments were, really.
Yeah. Man, I'm still trying to think through those things.
Yeah.
You know, in my work, in my dissertation with Dr. Gavin Kerr, who's the director, for my dissertation, we, knock heads and on the 5 ways and stuff, and I'm still learning from that dude. It's like, gosh, it's so deep, but it's such a great joy.
Doesn't it just like, it's amazing how smart Thomas Aquinas was.
Indeed, he was.
You can study these texts that he wrote.
Yeah.
And for your whole lifetime, and like you're still
There's
unpacking
Thomas scholars, man, that have just dedicated their entire lives and careers to just unpacking Thomas's text.
And he wrote them, I don't know. It's just like, man, I would have loved to talk to that guy.
He had it, man. And to do it at such a young age. I mean,
That's
he didn't
true.
have a long time to get all that stuff done, but the corpus of writing that he did and accomplished within the short amount of time frame that he did, it's just phenomenal. It's a divine gift, man.
Yeah,
that's what it was. I mean, and if he were here,
ordered life, he had to have an ordered life to make it happen.
Sure,
amen to that.
But if he were here, he would say it was a gift, right?
Absolutely.
It's not like he picked himself up and that's what he'd say, Adam. Don't give me those eyes. Don't give me those eyes like you think he might say something else.
Karlo, we also did like 2.5 hours of recording with Bishop Conderlo this week.
That's right. Yeah. So when was that? Was that yesterday?
2 days.
2 days ago.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. Yeah.
Yes.
So 2.5 hours with Bishop Conderlo on Tulsa time.
Yes. Which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait for that to come out.
Yeah.
I felt like I was becoming an Oklahoma cowboy.
Yeah. Have you seen the logo of that? By the way?
Well, it's got the cowboy hat. That's why I said that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Good.
And I apologize for my voice as well. I lost it yesterday. So, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
So I did 2.5 hours with Bishop Conderlo and Adam, and my voice was fine. And then after noon, when the code started coming in, I literally lost my voice and could not speak the entire night. And then I had to give a presentation yesterday at the diocesan staff meeting. And 5 minutes, so I couldn't talk. And 5 minutes into my presentation, all of a sudden, my voice started coming back.
All right.
And I was able to do 30 minutes of the presentation with my voice. And then I stopped, and then c'est tout fini. It was gone.
Ironically, I started praying about 4 minutes and 42 seconds into the presentation.
No correlation, I mean, of course. But
I'm not saying it's causation.
Right.
No,
I'm not
man.
saying that.
My mom and my sister, they claiming that. They texted me right away. Do you still have your voice? Did you get your voice back? I was like, yes, I got it back. Oh, it's because of our prayers.
Hey, also, you've been very busy working with Catholic Answers, obviously, on a new book. So what's the title of the new book?
Well,
it's coming out?
Yeah,
it's not even out yet.
It's not even out. I just submitted the manuscript. We're going to start the editing process. Actually, I think they started this week. The working title so far is The New Relativism, Unmasking the Philosophy of Woke Moralists. And it's planning on coming out in fall of 23. That's what we're shooting for. And the idea is the old relativism was basically, you have your truth, I have my truth. The new relativism is basically, you don't have your truth, it's my truth.
Yes,
and
that's right.
conform there too.
Right.
So I go through 10 thou shalt nots, 10 modern moral absolutes that are absolute in verbiage, but whenever you unmask it and begin to think through what's behind the absolutism, it's actually relative absolutism. So rather than absolute relativism, which was the title of Stefanik's booklet from Catholic Answers, exposing the absolutism of relativism, if that makes any sense, like there is no truth, that's an absolute claim.
Right.
This is exposing the relativism of the absolutism. So taking the absolute claims, thou shalt not be a white supremacist within modern culture. Thou shalt not be intolerant within modern culture. Thou shalt not impose within modern culture. Thou shalt not be anti-science. Thou shalt not misinform. Thou shalt not be a hateful, judgmental bigot. And whenever you unpack those modern absolutes within modern culture, what you discover it's actually relativism in disguise. And so what I do is I expose the relativistic thinking behind these absolutes and then begin to refute the relativistic thinking embedded in these modern absolutes. And equipping Catholics, to sift through the smoke screen and expose the absurdities of these modern absolutes. And it actually came about in response to trying to figure out how I'm going to overcome an obstacle that I faced. So I started writing this book being I'm going to write a book on relativism. I'm going to flex my intellectual muscles on relativism, you know? And so I collected all of the data, and I actually started typing the manuscript, getting it out. And then I came across this claim that relativism was dead. Relativism is dead. That's the claim, both within Christian circles and non-Christian circles. And that and so the label, it comes from, there was a particular individual who was using the label, but it came from two priests. I can't remember the name of the podcast, but two priests who do a podcast, and they had labeled it the new moral absolutism. And the claim being that relativism is old news, that's dead, we're in a shame culture now, implying absolutes. And I was like, holy cow.
That's true,
Yeah, it is true, right? And I thought to myself, man, am I not going to have a target audience for this book? This book is moot. It's futile. It's a pointless task to write this book on relativism if relativism is dead, right? And so I began to think through it and looking at all of these modern absolutes, and I was like, holy cow, relativism is not dead. It's even more sinister than it was before because it's masked behind these absolutes that everybody's just going to like intuitively adopt. Like, I don't want to be a white supremacist, so I'm just going to go along with modern culture and how they define white supremacy, which technically speaking is relativism, and I point that out in the book. And then they begin to adopt the relativistic thinking. I don't want to be intolerant. That's a bad thing, right? That's kind of a bad, icky thing, bad guy kind of thing. I don't want to be intolerant, so I buy into the modern thinking of thou shalt not be intolerant, and I end up falling into relativism. So that's what the book is all about. But I'm sure that when it comes out, I'll come back on.
Yes,
we'll talk
you
about
need
it
to.
some more.
Oh, yeah.
So that was a teaser.
My problem is that, like, I just really am better than most people. Or like, so you could say I'm supreme. I'm a supremacist, and I'm white. It's a problem. It's a problem. I also like supreme pizza, and so like, and I'm still white.
We'll edit that part out.
I would assume that was tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I do like supreme pizza, though. I mean, it's my go-to.
So this evening we're drinking a little bit of Early Times Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, 100 proof. It's bottled in bond. It is a long established bourbon, established in 1860. Early Times, it's their tribute to the historic bourbon, making honors at the quality standard for the U.S. bottled in bond in 1897. This act requires the whiskey to be, here we go, we were talking about this right before the show, that this act requires the whiskey to be a product of one distiller that is distilled at an American distillery during this distilling season. The whiskey must be aged for at least 4 years under government supervision and secured in federal buildings and bottled at 100 proof.
No kidding. Government supervision. I wonder who's the guy who's like you know, then you get a package and handling fee. Like, who's doing the handling? Like, we paying somebody?
The government.
It's the government. Oh, great.
So
you mean taxes? Oh.
A couple of weeks ago, Karlo, Dave posed a question about what is happiness, and I punted the question for a future episode, not knowing that you were going to be on, but thought this is a perfect time to talk about it.
I'm so glad you're here.
We can do it.
We'll talk about it on the other side of the break.
I'm very confused.
We will be right back.
So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about my book that just came out in July, my new book, Meeting the Protestant Response. So I might need to mention that.
Okay.
And then my podcast.
We have plenty of time.
Oh, yeah. Just keep that in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah.
My new podcast, I got to mention that.
Donde?
What's that? Oh, yeah, cool. Yeah. Good catch.
Oh, look at there.
Gene.
Boom.
Wait a minute. Who's messing with this mic? Ready? All right.
Hide your face behind your mic like you always do.
Patrick Coffin did that to me. When my very first day in the office, we took a picture together, and he like put the microphone in front of my face.
What?
Did he really?
The elbow is in here? I thought, like, why do I have
there?
But it was like way down. It was down here, and I was like, man, how come I have these old straight microphones?
No,
like,
it's there. It's just I got tired. I hid it from you because I got tired of you hiding behind the mic like this.
You think the elbow is the reason why I do that? Silly man.
All right, let's keep rolling one.
Silly man. You're a silly man. Now we need to lower it. Start over.
We can do that.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles, here with Adam Minahan, special guest, the one and only Cajun Uncaging the Truth.
That's what it is.
Karlo Broussard.
The other day, I was talking to somebody in the Catholic Answers office. I think it was Chris Check. And we were talking about you guys, and I was trying to remember exactly what y'all said. Cy Kellett knows it, though. He got it. He says it all the time now.
Does he?
Yeah.
All right. That caught on?
I started that.
Yes.
Yeah, and like we always talk about you guys and y'all's podcast on Catholic Answers Live. The Cajun and Cajun the Truth.
That's right. It's great.
That's great. TM. Sorry, Karlo.
Yeah.
Just trademarked
We want
it.
the royalties, okay? So, as Adam mentioned right on the other side of the break, we were talking about happiness the other day.
Yeah.
Well, it came up. We weren't actually talking about it, but
Right.
it came up. And then I realized as we were talking about it that I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
That I was confused. And it's like, no, it seems like it's nothing. I know what joy is, but it seems like happiness is. This is what I was saying the other day. So I'm just setting it up. It seems like it's just like a feeling, which is stupid. And like, I don't want to talk about feelings on the Catholic Man Show, you know?
Well, if you were a being such that the highest good of your nature was satisfaction of feelings, you were just a physical being without a spiritual soul.
Okay.
And feelings was the highest function
You'd be an animal.
of your being, of your nature.
Okay.
Then the satisfaction of those feelings, right? The satisfaction you feel, the pleasurable delight would be the highest kind or form or type of happiness. But since we as rational animals have a higher operation, action, function, in as far as we have spiritual knowledge, spiritual love, right? Intellect, will, that kind of stuff. That means that the satisfaction that we have as a human being is going to be our highest form of happiness, our complete or perfect form of happiness is going to be over and above the satisfaction of our bodily desires or the acquiring of pleasant feelings.
Can we back up just for a second? Can we give a definition? Do you have a definition of what is happiness?
The perfection of the thing's nature.
Okay.
So the happiness of a thing.
When something is fully actualized.
That's right.
Its potential.
Yeah. And that's determined by the nature of the thing, the kind of thing that it is. So a plant that's in sunlight and getting watered is a quote-unquote happy plant because the plant is being actualized according to its nature, its potential, right? It's doing what it's meant to do given the kind of thing that it is. It's a plant. And it's not going to be a happy plant if it's like away from the sun, out of sunlight, not getting the water. It's going to be a bad plant. It's going to die. So it's a happy plant, and as far as it's functioning according to what its nature determines it to do.
So plants actually can be happy.
Yeah, in that sense, given the kind of thing that they are, if we define happiness as the perfection of the thing's nature, we can say a plant can be happy.
Let me ask you this: can a rock be unhappy?
Well, a rock, all the rock can do in its proper operation is to exist, and so it cannot be unhappy. Because insofar as it exists, it is happy.
They have like maximal happiness.
Now, I'm like using that term in a very restricted, narrow, technical sense of the perfection of a thing's nature. Sure. But then again, some will even debate, does a rock even have a nature? So like the rock itself. It
seems like it does.
Does it even have a nature? Or is it simply a conglomeration of specific substances that are accidentally conjoined?
But there is a thing that we call rock.
That is true. There is some legitimate argumentation as to whether that rock here, that piece of rock actually has a nature, or the individual substances being accidentally ordered that we call a rock, right?
Yeah, but you can do that with almost anything.
Not necessarily, because living things, although they are made up of individual substances, right? But because there's a substantial unity, it is now classified as one thing, like the plant, right? There's a lot of different material stuff that's making up the plant. But because of the soul of the plant, uniting all of that material stuff into a unified being, a unified thing that's going to operate for certain ends, act for certain ends, grow towards the light, take in the nutrients from the soil, that is unified, right? So it's not individual substances, it's one substance. All right, I'm getting really in the weeds.
I know, but here's what I think you do. You take somebody who doesn't think that the rock has a substance, and it's not like a unified whole or whatever, and you hit him in the face with one. And be like, I don't know, it felt feel integrated to you.
Well, all of those,
if
it's not an individual substance, you would have individual substances that are accidentally conjoined in such a way that brings about the hardness, right? Yeah. So it's the hardness that you're feeling, right? These individual substances being accidentally conjoined. Now, that's a hypothetical.
That's what we call a rock.
Yeah, that's that's one option, right? Okay, so
I think a rock is I think a rock is happy. Next time I see a rock, I'm gonna be like, "Hey guys, look at that rock. That is a happy rock."
All right, so if we
look at that rock,
if we go up on the hierarchy of being, right? So you got inanimate, rock, animate without sentient powers like sensation. You have plants, right?
Okay.
So plants can be quote unquote happy in the sense that they're achieving a sort of perfection of their nature.
Okay.
So if we have a being that has a nature such that it has all the powers that a plant has, but more powers such as sensation and self-locomotion, well then that being, insofar as it is achieving its highest operations, sight, hearing, moving, it's going to be achieving a quote-unquote happiness. So Molly downstairs, your chocolate lab there, beautiful chocolate
named
lab.
after Our Lady.
Yes.
Awesome. So Molly can be quote-unquote happy given the kind of thing that determines that kind of happiness, right? Okay, so we go up on the hierarchy of being. We have not only a sentient being in rational animals, not only an animal, but a rational animal. So we have everything, all of the powers that plants have, all of the powers that animals have, non-rational animals. But we have other powers, higher powers of intellect and will, spiritual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, freedom of choice, right? Love, or spiritual love, I should say. These kinds of powers are determine the kind of thing we are. So our happiness, a human happiness, is going to be determined by our nature, which includes not only the vegetative powers, the sentient powers, but also the rational powers. So for us as human beings, the highest kind of happiness, the complete or perfect happiness for us as human beings is going to be all of these powers operating on full cylinders, right? Everything's firing. All cylinders are the cylinders fire. Is that how cars work?
Yeah. I think I'm pretty
okay. So everything's just like humming, like people often talk about it. Anyway, I'm not going to get political there, but things are humming, right? It's just like, it's like perfection, because all of our powers are operating to their highest maximum capacity. Now, this is very important whenever we're talking about human happiness, because although complete and perfect human happiness involves bodily sensation and pleasantness of the senses, it's going to involve the knowing of truth and the experiencing of the good, loving the good, right? And love, knowledge and loving relationships. But if the orderness or the rest of the senses, as Aquinas says, if the pleasantness of the senses is taken away, that's a kind of happiness that's curtailed, at least in this life, because obviously we're not always having pleasantness of senses or rest of senses.
Sure.
But we can still have the highest or a higher kind of happiness when the rational powers are functioning properly, when we're coming to know the truth and you're learning or you're experiencing loving relationships. And so in this life, there's going to be a mixture of unhappiness insofar as you don't have rest of the senses all the time, and higher kinds of happiness, or the inverse, where you're lacking the highest kind of happiness of knowing truth and experiencing loving relationships and friendship, but you're experiencing pleasantness of the senses of, indulging in food, drink, and sex. So understanding our nature...
Not that they're mutually exclusive.
They're not.
Right.
They're not. But once we understand our nature and all the powers that we have as rational animals, that's going to help us figure out what the heck is human happiness. The perfection of our nature. Well, what is our nature? Rational animal. So all of the powers that go with being animal, all of the powers that go in being with rational, when all of those powers are humming, that's perfection of human nature. That's human happiness.
Okay, so this is going to show my ignorance here, but I just, for definitional purposes, to order myself in this understanding, is powers what actualize the potency of in something?
Okay, so you have a power, and a power is like your intellect, and the power will be actualized. So there's a certain potential. So my intellect has the potential to know Aquinas' 5 ways with perfection. Right?
I think about potentiality and power as being basically the same thing.
That's kind of what I was trying to figure
necessarily,
out.
Not
the
necessarily.
The power's what moves
for us, a power is going to be a capacity A power is going to be a potential that needs to be actualized. So we have a power, the intellect, which provides me the power in the capacity in virtue of which, the principle in virtue of which I can understand or know something. Now, for us as finite creatures, that power, intellect, in order to be in act, moves from potency to act, right? But in God, that power, the intellect, the divine intellect, doesn't move from potency to act. It's always in act.
I see how they were definitely different for him.
So this is why you can't identify power with potentiality.
But for us, they're the same.
Yeah.
They end up being the same anyway. Yeah.
The power, when in potency, has to be moved to act. So the intellect is a power, and in order to be in act and understand, it's got to be moved to that actual state.
Right. See, that's what I thought, Karlo.
You know what? Yeah.
I knew it.
And here's to tie it all together. When the intellect is in act, knowing and understanding reality, therein lies happiness.
We'll be right back.
Okay. I knew it wasn't a thing. I knew it was made up.
Did I mess that up?
No.
At the end?
No. We were just trying to. I was just trying to understand it. This is just a lack of my.
No. That's good. I know we got in the weeds there, but I figured that's what the Catholic Man Show is all about.
Yeah,
I feel like I'm being dragged by a motorcycle, and I'm like hanging on to the seat, and I'm just like glad I have steel toe boots on, Yeah,
I can give you a concrete example whenever we come back.
Okay. No, but that was.
Okay.
I mean, like.
No, I was good. Like, I just wanted to make sure.
Me too. I actually was following.
I was tracking. I just want that. That was why I was trying to act. My main question was really the difference in potency and power.
The potency is not a perfection. The potency is an imperfection. The potential or the power, in order for it to be perfected, must be in act, because act is perfection.
Sure.
Yep. Okay. I dig.
Because when the power is being exercised, it's no longer potent.
What you mean by power being exercised is power in act.
Right.
The intellect in act.
Right.
Adam, say something about the store on Patreon.
Okay. This is why we pay Jim the big bucks.
Amen, brother. Always got to have somebody keeping it straight.
Don't you think Jim would look fantastic, like in red with some white trim? I think it would look great.
You got the look.
All right, let's roll on.
Be like that Wendy's commercial where the dude goes and sits on the guy's lap.
Right, yeah.
Eating the Frosty.
I do have a great Santa story that you would have.
A great what?
Santa story.
Santa, okay.
So, A.J. Hoffman and another friend of mine go to the botanical garden to see all the early lights. It's like a preview of all the lights. And Santa is there, but he's wearing green. They call it like a green Santa because like it hasn't ripened into Christmas yet.
He's in a garden, man. He's got it
right. You know what? At the botanical garden,
his
I dig
potential
it.
has not been actualized.
That's right.
But here's it.
There you go.
You know what? You need to put that guy next to some bananas.
But here's the real kicker. So this was like 3 weeks ago. Santa comes to AJ's daughter. She's like 7. She goes, "Do you know why I'm wearing green?" And she goes, "Well, because it's ordinary time."
And of course, Santa has no idea what that is. Which is how we knew he's not the real Santa.
Absolutely.
Gotcha.
You like Will Ferrell.
You're not Santa. You sit on a throne of lies.
Welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. Here sitting with Karlo Broussard from Catholic Answers. Go check out his new book that just came out. Shop.catholic.com is where you can find it. Answering the Protestant Challenges.
Nope. Meeting the Protestant Response.
Meeting the Protestant
How
Response.
to answer common comebacks to Catholic arguments.
Very good, very good. It would be a great stocking stuffer for
absolutely
for all Catholics. You can also
every chapter in that book start with "That's not what the Catholic Church believes."
No, it actually starts with, this is what the Catholic Church believes.
Okay, because I feel
and
like
here's the argument for it.
It's a positive, not a negative.
The way you meet the Protestant response is, well, that's actually not what the Catholic Church believes.
Yeah, so the idea...
And then you say more things after that.
The idea is that I go through the major Catholic arguments, like the biblical text that we've provided in our tradition in support of certain beliefs, and then asking and answering the question, what do Protestant apologists say in response to our appeal to those biblical texts in support of our beliefs? Why don't they buy the Catholic interpretation? Because often I always get, when people are getting started in apologetics, like, why don't Protestants get it? These texts are so clear, right? Well, there are actually reasonable answers as to why they don't get it.
And I'm sure Protestants are thinking, why don't Catholics get it?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I wanted to give a voice to Protestant apologists, past and present, to articulate, right, why they don't think these texts support or prove the Catholic position. And then ultimately I show why those responses fail and are not successful to refute the Catholic argument, allowing for us to continue appealing to these texts. And so it's a part 2 apologetics, because so often we get involved in biblical apologetics and we learn these texts and we're like, yeah, man, and you take that initial step to provide the biblical evidence for our belief, but often Catholics are not trained or prepared for the counter. Yeah. So it's countering the counter, rebut the rebuttal kind of thing.
Nice. Okay, again, another good stocking stuffer. You can go also to CatholicManShow.com. We have hats, shirts, glasses, drinkware. Drinkware. Yeah.
Sent to you by Jim.
Yeah, Jim will take care of that for us.
My son used to, because I think he's like worn out now, but I remember you guys had given me a Catholic Man Show hat as a gift. Nice. And I don't normally wear hats, but my son does. Yeah. So my son was wearing the Catholic Man Show hat for quite some time.
Who is that YouTuber who came out like saying he was converting to Catholicism?
Cameron
Bertuzzi,
yeah, Cameron, yeah.
He's a Catholic Man Show fan?
He was wearing one of our Catholic Man Show t-shirts. We don't know if he listens to the show, but he had our t-shirt on in the video when he said he was going to become Catholic.
Wow.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Awesome. It's awesome that he's coming.
Man. The cool thing is that he's becoming Catholic, not that he had our shirt on.
Yeah.
Both and, brother.
But I like that.
That's a Catholic.
But I am glad he wore the shirt.
Okay, so Karlo, you've been here in Tulsa for this week.
Yeah, man.
We were able to maximize all of the potential of the things that you've been able to do here in Tulsa.
We were making the intellect in act.
That's
and
right.
Thus achieving human happiness, or on the path.
I felt good about it.
But in the car on the way back to your hotel today, I posed something talking about, knowing that we were going to talk about happiness, and you were like, I don't know if that's true, or I don't know if
we're going to get into that here, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good. I think it's a good idea.
Wait, ask me first. I want to.
Well, I
see if I get
posed
it right.
the question that I made the statement that I thought like the best way to start off talking about like the moral life or the good life, or is to start off by talking about happiness, because everybody wants to be happy, and so like. We should to start evangelizing people. You should, it's a good start is happiness. Now that's not what the Catechism does, because the Catechism goes like God, creation, Christ, His church.
Yeah, well, it basically walks through the creed essentially.
But not the Catechism as a whole, but in the moral life section, the Catechism follows Aquinas on this, and starting with beatitude, which is happiness.
Which is happiness.
So it is true that technically and objectively speaking, the starting point is the end. You look to the end, and the end determines the means by which you take in order to achieve that end of happiness. So it's true, but in conversation, David, the conversation we're having is like, okay, let's say I'm talking to somebody who's engaging in same-sex sexual activity, and I, as a Catholic, I've been inspired by these Catholic speakers who talk about happiness all the time, right? And so I go to this person who's engaging in such behavior, and I say, that's not gonna make you happy. And so I'm inviting you to a life of happiness. Now, objectively speaking, that's true. But I'm not like sewed on what position to take here. I'm just thinking out loud here. But I've often thought, well, I'm sympathetic to the homosexual person or the person who's engaging in that sort of behavior, same-sex sexual activity, to simply assert back,
I am happy,
right? I mean, man, I was for the longest time in isolation, had no companionship. I was an emotional wreck. And now I found this person, and I'm like emotionally satisfied. I have companionship, and I even getting some physical pleasure. I'm pretty darn happy. Well, do you know that statistically people who engage in such behavior go to sleep at night and they're not happy in the darkness of their room, and they're, like for some people, yeah, that's probably the case where they're feeling that shame and that guilt.
And maybe that very person will have a moment like that in the future, but
yeah, but there's going to be somebody who's like putting his or her head on the pillow at night and feeling perfectly content, right? And so I worry about that approach, because it's just wheels spinning in the air, because the question is not really whether it's going to make us happy, because that presupposes the ultimate fundamental question is this behavior moral or immoral? Like, is this what I ought to be doing as a human being? Happiness is a consequence of the right or wrong behavior, right? In doing right behavior, then you're achieving perfection of human nature and therefore happiness, right? And then if you're doing wrong behavior, then technically speaking, like, that's not operating according to your full perfection and therefore unhappy in Aristotle and Aquinas' sense, but with physical pleasure and emotional comfort and stuff, like there is a legitimate kind of happiness that's being experienced.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
So in evangelization, the real question of trying to invite people or persuade people out of that lifestyle is to try and show them why such a lifestyle is not the right kind of lifestyle for us as human beings.
Yeah.
It's immoral, right? Now, it's true that you might persuade some people with stats and showing the negative experiences of some people living that lifestyle.
Probably very, very few.
But that person I'm talking to can always just say, it's not me.
Right.
That might be that other person, but that ain't me.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So I'm often of the opinions, at least currently in my thought process right now, that the real question that we need to be getting at is it the right kind of human behavior? Now, that person might not give a flip about human morality, right? Human morality. Well, I guess so, because angels are not humans, so there's human morality. Thinking out loud here. They might not give a flip about that. And if that's the case, well then, you can't play the game of reason, right? So it's just like, pray for them, go on your merry way. But if they have some sensibilities to the moral life, well, then the conversation is going to have to proceed as to whether you think this is moral or immoral. Even the question of love, like people often talk about, well, same-sex sexual activity is not loving activity. Well, in that person's mind, it is.
Right.
They're expressing love to the other individual. So we have to get back to the more fundamental question, well, what is love? Well, the good of the other. Well, what is the good? So here we are again.
Exactly.
Back to perfection of natures, right? Back to what's appropriate activity for the kind of thing it is.
Right.
So we're back to the morality question. And so that's
I don't think I'm willing to say
we were
what
in
the best way is to start that conversation.
We were in the Chick-fil-A drive-through talking about this.
Yeah. I could eat there 7 times a day.
But I actually agree. Like, so when we fleshed this out, I was like, yes, I actually agree with this. I agree with this idea. My only thought was that if you start out with happiness, even though you get to the moral life, everybody wants to be happy, so you can at least in the language aspect, you can start on some common ground and then say, okay.
And I'm sympathetic to that.
See, I just don't think that you could say there's a best way to start that conversation, because
everybody's
it's a conversation.
Different. Everybody's
different. And a conversation takes place with a individual person.
Absolutely.
And so the best place to start that conversation with that individual is, what is it that is like attracting them to have that conversation at all? Why is it that this person is even willing to discuss it with you in the first place?
Right.
Okay, whatever that reason is, that's the best place to start.
Yeah, that's good insight. Yeah, the problem, like with the happiness issue, is that we're starting off with such diverse understandings of happiness.
Yeah,
we're just equivocating on the term. Although, I mean, technically not, because what they're describing as happiness, we affirm is a kind of happiness. It's just a lower kind of happiness. That's comporting with or matching up with lower goods of human nature. But that's just disordered and not in harmony with the higher goods of the measure of reason and what reason dictates for the type of behavior involving our sexual powers, right? And so, I mean, they're not wrong, totally speaking, in saying that, yeah, I'm happy in this behavior, because there are some goods that they're achieving considered in and of themselves.
Right.
We're able to see by the light of reason they're not placed in their proper place or ordered within the whole of human nature, which the higher goods of intellect and will and the measure of reason dictates those lower goods.
Okay, so just to be clear, I mean, I know Aquinas says that the highest form is the intellectual life, right? The highest form of happiness is
because that's the highest power that we have,
okay,
or
so
highest.
The hierarchy is as what?
Well, yeah. So the will is a rational appetite. So the will is subservient to the intellect. So the intellect is the highest power that we have. Mm-hmm. So intellect and will constituting the powers of the soul, having their seat in the soul, and then you have all of the bodily
appetite,
powers.
The carnal pleasure.
Yeah, with regard to pleasure. Now, also you're going to have the highest power of sense, which would be normally identified as sight. And then other sensory powers, the achievement of their goals, like seeing things, is going to bring satisfaction to the very being that has the power. Mm-hmm. And then you also have the powers of animality, such as you know taking nutrition, right? Well, that would be vegetative, but also propagating the human species, right? So whenever we engage in that sort of activity, that would be part of our animal nature.
In carnal pleasures.
Yeah, carnal pleasures. Yeah.
Okay.
So you can divide up the spiritual and carnal. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to make sure I understood the hierarchy as well. Okay. When we get back, we're going to be continuing this conversation with Karlo Broussard from Catholic Answers. Go check out his new book, shop.catholic.com. Call him whenever he is on Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-31-TRUTH. We'll be right back.
You remembered the phone number?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, he was flexing that, showing that at Tulsa time. He was like, I know the number and you don't.
You didn't know the number?
I don't know the number.
888-318-7884 or 888-318-31-TRUTH.
Because whenever Sai's making that announcement, I'm like, I'm researching.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get going again, I have I was reading this book, Vocation to Virtue. It's by Kent Lanowski. He's a professor over in Wyoming College, and the book is put out by Catholic CUA. And
what is it called?
Vocation to Virtue.
Okay.
And he makes the claim that now I don't want to butcher it, so this is my understanding of his claim. That Augustine says that the higher you grow in your moral life within the vocation of marriage, the less attractive or the less satisfying carnal pleasures are, because your senses are ordered more towards the higher goods, like intellect and your will. Thus, the procreative act is less desired.
Well, I could see with regard to desire, but not experience. Like, as I would think about it from the hip, I would think that, yes, the more you taste...
Did you mean to make that pun?
From the hip?
No, I didn't mean to make that pun.
That's why I chuckled.
You get it now, though, right?
The more you taste the higher goods, the less desire you have for carnal pleasures.
Right.
But when you experience the carnal pleasure, given the proper order that they have to the highest goods,
it ascends to the higher goods.
The pleasure is more intensely experienced. Mm-hmm. This is why holy sex is better sex, because it's more pleasurable.
I have a theory that...
This is going to be interesting.
No, you've heard it before.
I mean, just think about in the bodily resurrection. Like, what we experience of sensory pleasure in this life pales in comparison to the sensory pleasure we will experience in the bodily resurrection, because the soul is so perfectly ordered and so delighted in its order, it overflows into the body, because the body becomes entirely subject to the soul. So the body will experience the delight of the soul, which will be an intense pleasure that goes beyond what we can even possibly fathom. And this is why sex is so important, because it's a taste of that. It's the highest sensory pleasure we have in this life, which is just pointing us to a sensory pleasure that goes beyond. So I've been told, I've never seen this.
Love.
I've been told, but I've never seen this, but like some mystics who go in ecstasy, like
Teresa of Avila.
Okay, so that's true. I've never seen it. I've never read it.
There's a whole statue and everything on it.
Yeah, where she's like, pew!
Yeah,
you
she's
know?
like...
Yeah, so...
Like, like having orgasmic,
manifestations.
That's what it looks like anyway. Yeah.
But that would make sense theologically, right? Because the body's humming, man. The blood's flowing.
Yeah. So I have a theory that at the moment of the incarnation, Our Lady experienced more physical pleasure than any person has or ever will experience on this planet.
I don't think so, because I want to say that the glorious bodily resurrection would be more than that. Of the incarnation. Of her conceiving the divine child in her womb.
Wait.
Because her body wasn't glorified. Like, her body wasn't...
He's talking about a live...
I just mean, like, people on this planet...
On this side of the veil.
Yes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I would agree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I thought you were comparing, like, any person on the planet for all of human existence from beginning to
everlasting. No. Just, I mean, like, here on
like,
planet...
While you were living...
Are we live right now?
Yeah.
Well, we're still on Facebook.
Yeah.
Can they hear us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's my theory.
I didn't know that.
It's okay.
We talk about it all, bro.
Yeah, we talk about we don't
We're
hide.
good.
But, you know, like, okay, so in Genesis, when it says that God put Adam into a deep sleep, the word for deep sleep is ecstasis.
I didn't remember that from my Bible class.
Where we get the word ecstasy. You know, actually, like, so John Paul II talks about that actually, like, God returned Adam to a state of non-being, that he, like, pulled him out of himself, right? And, like, that's kind of like what you experience in ecstasy. Like,
you're turned out of yourself.
Exactly, right. And so I just think there's something very fitting about the first Adam at his introduction to the first Eve, when you have the second Eve, you know, bringing forth the second Adam, that there's this moment of ecstasy, and not to mention that it seems also like that God has just inherently linked procreation and pleasure, right? That he saw it fitting to put those two things together.
Well, so, because if it ain't pleasurable, you ain't gonna do it.
And for her, whose appetites were perfectly formed,
right?
She was humming. You know, I mean, like, okay, forget St. Teresa of Avila.
Yeah.
Okay? In that moment where the Holy Spirit descended and became one with her, I mean, that's going to be this is just my theory, so it could be wrong. I just feel like nobody has experienced more pleasure than Mary.
Yeah. With regard to the pleasure side of things, I agree. But I wouldn't want to sexualize that pleasure, you know, and reduce that pleasure to sexual pleasure.
Sure.
But with regard to the body humming and operating in its full capacity, and there being a pleasure and consequence as an effect of that, absolutely, it just would not be restricted to sexual pleasure.
Sure,
right?
No.
Because
I would say it would transcend it to a spiritual pleasure,
because it's more expansive.
Right, exactly.
Right, that full bodily pleasure, the bodily pleasure that Our Lady would have experienced in this life. Maybe in the incarnation. I mean, granted, she didn't have like perfect bodily pleasure because she still suffered in her wayfaring state, right? In the sense, that state of journeying to the bodily resurrection. So, but with regard to the bodily resurrection, that bodily pleasure is just it's the entire body that's.
Well, it wasn't just her body that would have experienced pleasure.
Emotional
but
pleasure,
her whole
psychological
person
pleasure
would have experienced pleasure, right?
Yeah,
you know, every facet of her being.
But in this life, though, we can't say that in full because she did not experience full pleasure because she suffered, right? I mean, she underwent. That's Our Lady of Sorrows. That is not pleasurable.
Well, this is something else that I want to get back to, like on the episode. We'll bring it up again. Like, all right, we talk about pleasure, like live the moral life. You know, you'll be happy. Except that it seems that
it might get you killed. That doesn't make you happy.
It seems like the people who do what you're talking about, their lives suck the most. Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Okay. You know, they don't seem too happy to me. Like,
no, that's a good.
I don't want to end up on a cross. You know, so those people might feel that way.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Before we start, I just wanted to highlight a comment here from YouTube, really quick.
Sure.
It says, "I think they should have a show just talking to Juan. His contributions are generally awesome."
Did you write it?
No. Mr. Colin Slattery did. He sounds like a very.
That sounds like a made-up name.
Sounds like your alias.
Sorry, Colin. It just sounds like a made-up name. All right.
Dude, I didn't. Never mind. I keep forgetting we're on Facebook Live
and YouTube Live.
We didn't say anything inappropriate.
All right. Moving on.
Oh, sometimes we do.
I
mean, welcome back to the Catholic Man Show. I'm David Niles here with Adam Minahan, special guest Karlo Broussard, the Cajun, uncaging the truth. So, Karlo, I don't know if you remember this. The very first time, I think it was the first time you were on the show, we talked about the 4 levels of happiness.
We did.
No, four levels of
manliness. But you had changed it into the 4 levels of manliness.
It's based upon Spitzer's 4 levels of happiness.
And we actually determined that there was a 5th level. I don't know if you remember what it was.
I did not.
It was the Dave. Do you remember that?
The Dave.
The Dave was
the Dave was the 5th level of happiness.
5th level of happiness.
Being in your presence.
Just being me.
Just being you.
It's a pretty exclusive level.
So that means you're something, a substance in the hierarchy of being that is above animal, above rational animal, above angelic natures, and above pure actuality.
Getting warmer.
So, man, there's something above pure actuality. How is that possible, man?
Ecce homo.
So we had an interesting conversation in between the break, and go check it out on YouTube. Made Karlo blush.
Karlo forgot we were live between the breaks. Wait, we're live?
I'm good. Yeah. But Dave, you posed an interesting question.
So we're talking about happiness, and especially in light of what your question to Adam, your question to Karlo from earlier about, is this a good way to start, a conversation about, in an evangelistic sense.
Right.
I think that a lot of people might say, no way, because look at the people who had what our definition of happiness was the perfection of
nature,
right? The perfection of our nature. Okay. So obviously Christ. Number 2 is Mary.
Yeah.
Okay. You're talking about the 2 people who suffered the most in the world, right?
Right.
So it doesn't seem like it does lead to happiness. It seems like it leads to suffering. And maybe the 2 things are inherently linked.
If our universe of thought is restricted to the state of journeying, the wayfarer state, right? And being on this side of the veil, then the answer is yes.
Good counterpoint here.
If there is no complete and perfect happiness of the absolute perfection of our nature that is attainable, then there's no point in living for Christ if that's not going to be granted unto us. Right. Because living for Christ in this life is going to entail a lack of complete, perfect human happiness. What is perfect, complete human happiness? Rational animal functioning on all powers, perfected and elevated by grace, right? Which can only be achieved in the beatific vision of heaven. So on this side of the veil, there's going to be imperfect happiness. And this is Aquinas' whole point, right? Beatitude in its completed state for us as human beings is the beatific vision.
And beatitude is?
The beatific vision.
Right,
happiness.
Okay.
But a supernatural happiness, not just a natural happiness, but a supernatural happiness, which is seeing the divine essence, the beatific vision in heaven. On this side of the veil, in this life, in our state of journeying, there can only be imperfect happiness, which means we're going to achieve some kinds of happiness. I know the truth. I have loving relationships. But like I got a headache today. Well, that's not complete happiness because I don't have rest of senses. So I'm experiencing unpleasant feelings, right? A headache, or I don't know, I got a broken knee or whatever it might be. I've got a fight, broken nose or something. Who knows?
Somebody threw a rock at me.
Yeah. So even Our Lady, right? Even Our Lady, Our Lady and our Lord in this life did not experience the completed and perfect state of human happiness because they were experiencing displeasure in the sensory apparatus, right? The sensory part of our nature. So if there is no state of existence where I can achieve complete and perfect human happiness, or I'm humming on all cylinders, right? Well, then, it would be futile. Heaven would not be a destiny worth living for if it weren't a state of complete and perfected human happiness.
Right.
So,
and if it wasn't better than what we've got now,
that's right. So, getting to your question about the martyrs, like, should I die for Christ? That's going to make you happy. Well, no, it doesn't.
Right.
Well, that person's only thinking of
this life,
right? Yeah. And sensory kinds of happiness, bodily kinds of happiness, carnal kinds of happiness, right? And not conceiving of the idea that there's another state of existence where there would be such perfect and complete happiness where you have rest of the senses in a completed state, not just rest of the senses, but experiencing intense pleasure throughout the entire body due to the delight of the soul in seeing the divine essence in heaven.
So I think this is another argument against starting off with happiness for like the evangelical conversation, because it might have a tendency to jump straight to martyrdom, and it's like
Now, here's something else to keep in mind. So St. Paul says, like, I rejoice in my sufferings, right? So he's like experiencing happiness in his sufferings. Now, in one sense, he's not experiencing perfect happiness because he's enduring the bodily pain, but he can still rejoice and experience a kind of happiness knowing that it's ordering him to the glory to come in heaven. Right. And even it has been, documented in the lives of the saints for some saints that God can give a grace of sensory pleasure within the midst of the suffering if he sees it fit. He could give that grace to where a person is legitimately happy in the midst of the martyrdom, right? So God can give that grace, whether he is withholding or impeding the physical pain, stopping the physical pain, blocking the physical pain. He could do that even for somebody who's but that wouldn't be an ordinary
when your eyes are fixed on a good that's so much great, infinitely greater than the minuscule suffering, even though it might seem like a lot of suffering
from our perspective
to other people, right? For that person going through it with their eyes fixed on heaven, the suffering seems, presumably rather mild.
But that's also why
the complete and perfect would not be achieved until the beatific vision. I just want to get that on the table.
Right.
Okay, yeah. But that's why, the dark night of the soul is such a more intense suffering, right? Because it's a suffering not necessarily of our lower faculties, but of our higher intellect and spiritual sufferings, correct?
Well, I'm not trained in spiritual theology, and I haven't read much on the dark night of the soul. So
right. Well, but you understand, like if you have if you're in desolation, like if your prayer is
if the desolation. I mean, from my experience, like I haven't studied enough to know what a sort of a spiritual desolation would that experience would be. I haven't researched enough.
There's also a huge difference between desolation and the dark night of the soul.
Right. I was trying to bring it
like if you're talking about a lack of consolation, like in my mind, because I haven't studied it enough, I'm only within the universe of the body and the senses, right? I'm not getting fuzzy-wuzzy feelings when I pray, but I'm still praying, right? Even though I'm not getting the physical consolations. So that experience of the progression of the spiritual life,
offering.
Yeah, that's going to be in the progression of the spiritual life where our Lord's going to pull the lollipop out the mouth and say, okay, do you love me or the lollipop, right? So he's going to take away the physical consolations.
Both. I love both, Jesus.
He might take away the physical consolations. But with regard to the dark night of the soul, I would have to do more reading to make any further comments on that. I just simply haven't studied spiritual theology enough to make any sort of definitive comments on it.
That's fair.
I have manifested my ignorance. I bow in humility.
Do you feel happy doing that?
Both and. I feel happy and unhappy. Unhappy because of my pride and my vanity. But happy because I acknowledge the truth. I'm ignorant.
Is pride a power?
Well, it's not like a power of the nature because it's not intellect or will. Pride would be, a righteous pride would be a rightful ordering, a virtue, right? So it'd be a habitual disposition of the soul for the good with regard to acknowledging my achievement and taking pride in that achievement. So that would be a virtue when it's rightly ordered.
Okay.
And then the unrighteous pride would be a vice. So not a power.
Right.
Like, obviously, power comes from virtues, but virtue can be used in multiple
demented
ways.
Power.
Right. Well, unrighteous pride would be a demented power.
I don't know if demented is the right word, but
it'd be more. It wouldn't be a power in the sense of like intellect or will, or like sight or hearing. It would be power in the sense of like loosely used term in the sense of virtue or vice.
I have the potential to be those things.
Well, insofar as you're a rational being, you have a potency to virtue or vice, right? Now you're by nature ordered to be humming in your rational powers, which is going to be virtue.
Yeah.
So you're naturally ordered to virtue in that sense, right? But you do have a real potency to deviate from that measure of reason.
Because I have will. So I guess it's really will. It's really will that's the power.
Yeah, your will is the power. That's correct. And whenever you use your will to deviate from the standard of reason, the measure of reason, order of good in human nature, therein lies the vice or the sin, right? Which would be unrighteous pride. When I have a disordered disordered love of self, rightfully ordered love of self, righteous pride. That's a virtue.
I love that so much.
Yep. So we can take pride. You can take pride in the Catholic Man Show.
That is sometimes confusing
Righteous
for
pride.
I think for kids. Like, wait, pride's bad, but we take pride in things, you know.
Yeah, and it's so important to distinguish those things, like violence. If you notice in modern movies, right? Modern, like, I don't know, I used to watch like The Flash and like Green Arrow. No killing, right? Violence is bad, or whatever.
Except they beat people up the whole time.
Yeah. So like, even just violence in and of itself, in our modern culture and sensibilities, violence in and of itself is bad. But we always have to distinguish between just or unjust. Did I say unjust?
Yeah.
Just or unjust violence. Right. These nuances are crucial, lest we be confused in our thinking.
Yes, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think you're totally right, and that's,
just like
that's the importance of movies,
right? The emotion of anger, right? Anger in and of itself.
Flipping over tables.
Absolutely,
that doesn't mean
it can be rightly ordered or disordered, just or unjust.
So the important thing in order to be happy is to.
I thought I heard the music coming on. Oh, there it is.
There it is. Yeah. So
that's why I was shutting up, man.
Yeah. But so the importance is to make sure that your will is ordered properly.
Absolutely, according to what the mind knows to be the good and the true and the beautiful.
Okay. We're out of time on the radio. Go check us out on thecatholicmanshow.com. You can check out this full episode, over 350 episodes that we've done over the last 6 years. Karlo, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys, for having me. It was so much fun.
We're on the Lord's team.
The winning side.
So raise your glass.
And cheers to Jesus.
Cheers. Okay, so we got to keep going for a little bit.
All right.
Funny story is that our show is on a country radio station in Texas.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Dead serious. They're hearing us right now.
For Spiritual Sunday.
That is so cool,
Sunday.
man.
So
well, hello to Texans.
KSEY.
KSEY, baby.
A country station.
Country radio station.
Wow. I wonder which country song they played before they played you guys.
Don't know.
Should have been a cowboy.
I'm a cowboy, baby. Not that one, I meant.
Johnny Cash. I was going to say Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash would probably
be do you know my 15-year-old Savannah? So she's like gorgeous.
I haven't met her.
Right?
Okay.
You haven't met her? Mm-mm. So she has this dream. She's saving up her money to buy a Ford Dually.
Okay.
And her dream is to marry a cowboy and live on a ranch, raising horses and farm animals. Did you know that?
That is it. I mean,
isn't that cool?
Yeah.
So sounds a lot like people in Oklahoma.
I was about to say, do you think Oklahoma's a good place for that?
I know plenty of those people.
All right.
So does she have any experience raising like animals?
Well, she used to work on a ranch when she was 6 and 7. So when we lived in Washington State, we had a dear friend of ours who had a little mini ranch. I get mini farm, ranch. I know this is supposed to be like a distinction between the two, but I'm conflating them or whatever. Yeah. So they had a mini farm. She had a couple of horses and some goats. And so once a week, Dominic and Savannah, I think Dominic was 9 at the time, Savannah was like 6.5. They would go to this lady's house, and tend to the farm, tend to the animals, and work on the ranch. And then she would give them horse lessons, riding lessons. They would
cool.
Get to ride the horse and all of that. And from then on, man,
she made the decision.
Oh yeah, she fell in love with the ranch.
There's something about girls and horses.
Yeah,
they just they fall
cool,
in love,
man. Yeah, it's so cool. It's such a cool thing. So since then, she's always she always wanted a cowboy and a ranch, man.
And a horse, I presume.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
otherwise, what do you need the dually truck for? I mean, aside from just looking cool, right?
Yeah, we're like driving on the interstate, or throughout town, and like she's got her phone and she's taking pictures of dualies all the time. Yeah.
Karlo, I did have a question.
Terrible gas mileage. She knows that, right?
She knows that. Okay. That's why she's going to marry a rich
cowboy.
A
rich cowboy.
That's the distinction.
Okay, now those are harder to find. Yeah. I'll tell you that.
Juan, go ahead.
On happiness, at moments you have like an intellectual assent. You understand something.
Yeah.
But you also can be sad.
Sure.
Because let's say
now you have to change your life or something.
Yeah, that or there's also like a loss in the family, right? Like
yeah,
you're happy of you have understand what happened and you're okay with it. So can you be happy and sad at the same time?
Yes, because you can distinguish kinds of happiness. So we would just follow Aquinas and say you're experiencing imperfect happiness. So, you might have some sort of displeasure within the body or emotional displeasure of sadness, right? But you have an intellectual delight in knowing the true, the good, and the beautiful. And so you're going to have a mixture of unhappiness and happiness, right? Pleasure and displeasure, pleasure in the spiritual sense, and then displeasure, whether emotional, psychological, or bodily, So it's just going to be a mixture of both. And we will never achieve a state of happiness where it is pure, let's use that term, pure happiness, devoid of all unhappiness, until we get on the other side of the veil in the beatific vision.
So if happiness is the perfection of our nature, is sadness defined as the imperfection of our nature, or sadness is
Yeah, there would be a lack. It would be considered as an evil of some sort.
So we would define sadness that way, and we wouldn't just say, oh, sadness is just kind of like this bad feeling. It's not just emotional state.
No, it would be a privation. Right. It's a lack
of being.
A lack of what ought to be in the human nature, which is the joy experience, even in the emotional state.
So plants are sadder than humans.
Well, we kind of say sad.
Because they don't have as much being.
Well, they don't if you want to define it like that, yes, I would agree with you. Mm-hmm. But when we say sad, we kind of normally equate that with emotions, an emotional
that's
distress.
what I'm kind of getting at.
But plants don't have emotions, so they're not going to experience a lack of due emotion, right? So they don't have emotions. That's a lack, but that's not evil. Evil is not just simply a lack of being. Like the tree does not have sight, but it's not evil that the tree does not see.
Right.
Or the rock does not see.
Nature.
That's right. But if Molly downstairs does not see, that's a real evil, because it's a privation of a good that the nature of the thing requires. Plant nature doesn't require emotional satisfaction.
Right.
So there's not going to be any lack of happiness relative to emotions. Mm-hmm. But for Molly, because animals have emotions as well, just not guided by the conceptual knowledge, right? Molly can experience a legitimate kind of emotional distress and thus be lacking in dog happiness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah, it just seems like the thing that we call sadness actually is not the opposite of happiness. Like, for instance, let's say as you progress, you come in in your relationship with Christ, and you're moving more into a deeper reality, right? And you get to this place where you start to have now a good view of sin. And you look at the world at now from this deep, deep, passionate love of Christ, and experience a great sadness because of of sin in the world. Okay,
right.
I'm happier. I'm moving up in happiness.
That's right.
But that upward movement is actually creating an emotional response
on this side of the veil
that we would call sadness. So it seems like they're actually not opposite of each other. What we call sadness.
Right, but at the same time, that emotional distress over sin in the world is not going to be present for the blessed in heaven, the beatific vision.
Right.
On the other side of the veil, that sadness is precluded from the perfect happiness of heaven, even though they have knowledge of sin in the world. This is why we talk about the blessed in heaven, even knowing those in hell not being sad, because of their knowledge and seeing the divine essence and knowing of the perfect ordered wisdom and justice of God, rejoicing in that ordered goodness,
right,
precluding all sadness, because the sin is seen as perfectly fitting within the whole order of the divine providence.
It just seems, though, that if happiness and sadness were truly opposite of each other, as you grow in one, the other should diminish. Right. If they were truly opposites, you couldn't
logically
grow,
opposite.
You couldn't grow in both at the same time.
Yeah.
So in this situation, if you're growing in happiness by developing this deeper relationship with Christ, and all of a sudden that brings you to more sadness because all of a sudden you
see the sin,
look at sin. So it seems like they are not actually opposite of each other.
Right. They're not opposite in a logical sense. Right.
Yeah.
such that if you're sad, you cannot be happy in any sense whatsoever, and if you're happy, you cannot be sad in any sense whatsoever. That would not be true.
So would you say that it is actually a good to be sad about sin?
Yes. Our Lord says it himself. Blessed are those who mourn.
Fantastic response. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Anytime you can quote Christ as an answer, it's
always because Jesus said this.
That's right. Well, but that on this side of the veil, that is a proper emotional response to the evil, to be sad over the lack of the good.
So that would be a happiness. Like being sad, it actually would be a
form of happiness because you're operating, you personally, according to your own proper nature. So that kind of sadness over the good, I wouldn't say, I mean, it's a lack of emotional pleasantness, but it's appropriate given our nature on this side of the veil. So I don't know how to reconcile those two yet. I'd have to think that through a little bit. So there is a lack of emotional rest and pleasantness, but at the same time, it's a proper and ordered response to the evil in this world, which is appropriate for my nature.
I suspect that there is a form of rest in it that, even though it might bring sad, it might bring tears.
Yeah.
You still are, it's like, you're still, the reason you're sad, you're sad is because of love.
That's right. That's
right. I mean, that's why Jesus is crying. That's why he's weeping.
Right. Well, even the anger,
having tears
anger
of, like blood.
Yeah, even anger over injustices. This is a good question, David. I've never thought about it. I mean, even anger over an injustice is a rightly ordered anger. That's not emotional pleasantness, right? The emotions are disturbed and aroused in that way. But it's ordered in the sense that it's a proper response to the stimulus, to the object, as seen by reason. So there's a certain order there. So there's a certain perfection there. But how does that reconcile or jibe with there being no emotional distress by way of anger in the beatific, when souls don't have emotions right now, but in the glorified body, right, when we get our bodies back.
So I think that.
So I don't know. I'd have to think about it.
I would try to distinguish it. This is what I would try to do. Distinguish it as like, okay, you might have an emotional anger, like, anger response. I'm putting that in air quotes, but that doesn't mean that you're actually disturbed. So when you watch an argument, a debate between, if there's an argument that breaks out, and we've all seen this where one person is kind of calm and just saying certain things. The other person is very emotional. Right. And it's very clear who's right. Okay, this person knows that they're right. That's why I'm not being disturbed. They might be, like, oh yeah, I'm giving forceful responses, but at the same time, they're not getting angry. They're not, so I think that you could say, kind of make an analogy there with the righteous anger, when you might have a response, a vigorous, loud response, but at the same time, it doesn't disturb your inner peace.
Yeah.
Because what I did was right. I'm not like stressed out about it later.
Yeah. And then one thought that just occurred to me is like, on the other side of the veil, in the glorified body, in the new heaven and the earth, there are no objects such that I could have the proper human response of anger, because there's no sin or evil or an injustice.
Right.
So now that I'm thinking about it out loud, we could say that the rightly ordered emotional response to an injustice that we call righteous anger is a perfection of the human being, given that you have such an object to respond to.
Yeah.
But when that object is no longer there, you're just not going to have that type of emotional response ever, right?
Yeah. I think
that's the reason why you wouldn't have the righteous anger.
You have to say that, given Christ's response in the temple.
Right, because there's no imperfection of Christ, right? That was absolute human perfection. Yeah.
If your will is a slave to your emotions, is there a way for you to still grow in virtue and grow in the moral life?
Well, I mean, you can grow in some virtues.
Yeah, the way is to stop making your will a slave to your emotions.
Right. Well,
I'm playing the interviewer.
Yeah.
To the interviewee. I'm asking him.
Next question.
This is like me teeing it up for. Like, I'm asking him.
Yeah, if we're talking about a particular slavery, the will through
effort. To answer. You had a question.
The will through effort will have to pull away and free itself from that slavery. It's not virtue yet, because whenever there's a tension there's not virtue, because the virtue is the humming, right? Getting back to what we were talking about earlier. So the continent man, the man who forgoes the immoral sexual activity, even though he's drawn to it, right? That's not the virtue of chastity yet. The virtue of chastity is going to be like, I recognize it's an evil, but I have no drawing to that.
No attachment.
Habitual response.
That's right. That's right. So, for the will to free itself from that slavery, it's going to be a process, and it's going to be working toward the virtuous state, right? So
also
you're
purgatory.
So you're on
it's
the.
Like,
well, actually, in purgatory, you don't grow in virtue. You can't.
No, but you
get rid of remnants of sin, but the state of virtue or the habitual dispositions are fixed after death. You can't grow in any virtue.
You've already it's closed off, but you're reaching to your maximum potential, right?
Only in the sense that you're going to achieve what your God has ordered you to achieve, which is the beatific vision, but you're not going to grow in any sort of spiritual muscles, right?
No, I would say you're moving towards your maximum reward.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which is eternal
Whether your
life.
bucket is 3 gallons, 5 gallons, 100 gallons, you're filling that bucket up to the max.
Nope. The 3 gallon or 5 gallon bucket's already completely full in purgatory.
Is it?
Yep.
How can it be completely full
because
if you still have attachment to sin?
Because charity, your charity is fixed.
He wrote a book on purgatory.
I know that's why.
Unhealthy attachments are the.
But that's why you're not in heaven. Is because
it's one of the remnants of sins that's impeding you from the beatific vision. But the theological virtue of charity is already fixed in purgatory. Even as some theologians would say, the natural virtues are fixed as well. Now, some have said that the good works that you have done in this life could possibly contribute to your increase in virtue in the next. But there's no work being done in purgatory in virtue of which you increase in virtue, right?
Right. No.
Because the church has taught that you rest after death and your works are complete. There's no working to be done in purgatory.
I'm not even sure what I'm going to do when I get there.
Well, you're going to just be passively receiving the purification. Although the church does seemingly teach in paragraph 958 of the Catechism that the souls in purgatory intercede for us here on earth. So you would be interceding in virtue of charity, exercising charity, but it not being meritorious of increasing in charity like it is in this life. So you can still exercise charity. What?
Was Thomas skeptical that the souls in purgatory could pray for?
Yes, he concluded they could not.
That's what I thought.
But the church seems to say that they can. Now Thomas is I got to remember what I wrote on this. I seem like I remember one of the reasons he gives is that they're going to be suffering so much that they're not going to be concerned about.
They're going to be preoccupied.
Yeah. Or that they don't have the beatific vision. Another reason he gives is that they don't have the beatific vision. But as I argue in my book, I think the Lord can infuse such knowledge, right, to a soul who does not have the beatific vision in order to pray for somebody else. I mean, we see that in the Old Testament. In 2 Maccabees where you have Jeremiah and the priest Onias interceding and they ain't got the beatific vision.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that is still a good argument. That how would they even necessarily be aware of your prayers to them?
Well, this is for a separated soul. Period.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So even in the beatific vision, the blessed in heaven would have cognitive awareness of our requests here on earth because it's a grace being given to them, either by way of seeing it through the divine essence itself, or God just giving them a separate grace to enhance the mind to know it, because they can't naturally know.
Right.
Our requests being made because because they're not in their human mode of knowledge. So it requires grace to know what's going on here on earth, something over and above their nature, because they don't have the phantasms, they don't have the body to operate with, which is the human mode of knowing.
They didn't achieve Dave level of manliness.
Fifth level,
the elusive fifth level.
Okay, Karlo, thanks so much for hanging out with us. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, man, this was a blast, dude. Yeah. What you talking about, man?
Let's do it again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's do it again soon.
Maybe next time I'll have a better voice.
It
I can actually
all worked
talk.
out. No. Want anything else? You good? Mucho?
Mucho.
Mucho.